The toast had barely cooled on my plate when she raised her glass. "To gold diggers," my mother-in-law said, looking straight at me. The guests laughed. My name wasn't even on the place cards. My fiancé stared into his drink. I didn't argue. Just smiled, folded my napkin, and caught the flash of my daughter slipping something into his pocket. It wasn't a note. It was the title deed. Signed. From me. For him. But only if he spoke now. I'd known the night would go like this. You can always tell when you're the real guest at your own celebration. No seat assignments for you. No wine poured. Just smiles too tight and jokes with edges. The caterer kept skipping me with the hors d'oeuvres. One waiter even asked if I was part of the help. I said nothing. Just adjusted the hem of my dress and stepped back into the wallpaper like they expected me to. My mother-in-law wore white. Of course she did. It was her son's rehearsal dinner, but you'd think it was her second wedding to him. Her dress sparkled under the chandeliers. I watched her tap her glass, saw the guests lean in with grins and cocktails lifted high. Her voice always had that syrupy chill. "Some women really know how to climb," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "And some men," she added, smiling sweetly at her son, "are just too kind to notice the ladder." Laughter. More than I expected. His college friend let out a wheezing cackle. His aunt wiped a tear from her eye. His ex, yes, the ex who had somehow been invited, smirked. I stared at my plate, still untouched. I didn't need to ask where my fiancé stood. He hadn't looked at me once since the toast started. Not when she said, "career in strategic dating." Not when she handed me a gift box and I opened it to find a spatula with a pink ribbon tied around the handle. "Something for your future kingdom," she said. A few people laughed. Someone even clapped. I looked at the spatula, then at my hands. Then I smiled, gently closed the box, and rested it beside my plate. I had told myself I wouldn't cry tonight. Not in front of them. Not again. The last time she humiliated me like this was at Christmas, when she gifted me a gym membership and a wrinkle cream set in front of the entire family. My fiancé said she was just blunt. That I was too sensitive. That I should let it go for the sake of peace. But tonight wasn't Christmas. And tonight, I hadn't come unprepared. I caught the flicker of movement from my daughter. She was 12. Smart. Too observant for her own good. She'd been silent all evening, barely touching her food, watching me like she was waiting for a cue. She rose from her chair, walked across the room with all the quiet grace I never had at her age, and slipped a folded envelope into my fiancé's jacket pocket as if she were hugging him. No one noticed. Not even him. He just blinked and kept sipping. But when her hand brushed his chest, his eyes dropped to the envelope. He froze. I didn't react. I took another sip of my water and shifted my chair back slightly. The night buzzed around me, guests laughing, silverware clinking, phones snapping photos. I heard someone say, "Well, at least she's pretty." Another voice, "Wonder how long this one lasts." I could have said something then. I could have asked if they'd all feel the same if they knew who actually paid for this dinner. Who booked the venue? Who covered the down payment on his new firm's office space when the bank wouldn't approve his loan? But I didn't. That's never been my style. You let people laugh when they don't know they're on borrowed time. He finally stood. My fiancé. He was pale, but steady. Glass in hand. The room hushed, expecting a response or maybe a weak little joke to pivot from the burn his mother had served. But he didn't smile. Didn't raise his glass. His eyes went from the envelope in his hand, to the table, to me. He opened it. The moment hung there, tight and trembling. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His mother tilted her head, eyebrows raised, still grinning. "Something wrong, sweetheart?" she asked. And then, he looked at me. Not the way he usually did. Not with apology or confusion or that faint shame when his family got cruel. This time, it was something else. A recognition. A flicker of understanding that cracked something open behind his eyes. But before he could speak, the lights flickered. Not a full blackout. Just enough to make the crowd murmur, for heads to turn, and someone to joke about the venue's cheap wiring. The moment passed. Or maybe it paused. He folded the paper back up, slid it into his inside pocket, and cleared his throat. I waited for the words. For the defense. For him to rise to the moment. To make her eat every word. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he stepped away from the table, toward the podium where the mic stood. His footsteps were slow. Hesitant. As if he wasn't quite sure what he'd say when he got there. My daughter slid back into her seat beside me, her hand wrapping around mine under the table. She didn't look at me. Just squeezed. Once. Steady. My mother-in-law tapped her glass again, ready to move the spotlight back to herself. "Let's not ruin the night," she said. "I think it's clear we're all just having a little fun." He reached the mic, tapped it once. A hush swept through the room. He opened his mouth. And then the doors opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside. Slim. Polished. Carrying a leather briefcase and a calm expression. He nodded at me. I didn't nod back. He walked straight to the podium, past my stunned fiancé, and placed the briefcase on the edge of the table with a soft, deliberate thud. "I believe you'll want to hear this," he said, looking out at the room. And just like that, the night wasn't hers anymore. I wasn't always this silent. There was a time I would have snapped back, defended myself, demanded a seat that matched what I'd given. But that was a long time ago, before I learned that the loudest voice in the room is usually the one trying hardest to hide their weakness. My quiet didn't come from fear. It came from exhaustion. From years of being talked over, stepped around, edited out. You only stay loud for so long before you realize no one's ever really listening. And somewhere along the way, silence becomes armor. It becomes power. I met him in my second year at the gallery. I was working late, cataloging an installation we couldn't afford to insure, when he walked in wearing a suit that didn't fit and a smile that did. Said he loved art but hated artists. Said I looked like the kind of person who didn't waste time chasing clouds. I didn't know what to make of him, but I laughed. He asked for coffee. 2 months later, he was coming over every night with takeout and dreams. His company had just failed. He had debt. No real plan. But he made me feel like someone worth unfolding for. So I helped. Sold 2 of my pieces, invested in his second startup, let him work out of my spare room when he couldn't make rent. I didn't ask for repayment. I didn't even ask for thanks. I just wanted to be part of something that might grow. His mother hated me from the beginning. Said I was too old, too boring, too low energy. She used words like pedigree and standards when she spoke to him about his future. I was introduced as his friend at their family gatherings, even after we moved in together. I'd bring dishes, help decorate, clean up after his cousin's kids, and still be handed a folding chair near the trash bin. One Thanksgiving, I made the entire meal. Spent 2 days prepping, baking, roasting, arranging. She told me it was a brave attempt, and scraped my stuffing into the bin in front of me. He said nothing. Later, he kissed my shoulder and said, "She'll come around." But she never did. And he never pushed. The gallery didn't last. Rent rose. Clients dried up. I closed it quietly and took on freelance consulting to keep us afloat. I did branding pitches, wrote ad copy for toothbrushes, helped rich men tell their boring stories in ways that made them sound noble. I brought in enough to cover the bills, and when he landed his next investor, he didn't mention my help. At the party, he thanked his mentor, his college roommate, and his dog. But not me. I smiled. Took photos. Slipped out early to pick up our daughter from my sister's place. She was a surprise. A small, beautiful surprise who changed everything and nothing at once. His mother barely visited during my pregnancy. When she did, she said things like, "I hope she doesn't get your nose." After the birth, she brought a nanny resume and suggested we start thinking of what's best for his career. I remember holding my baby, sore and shaking, and thinking, I should leave now. But I didn't. I thought about the life I wanted for my daughter. About the stability. About how maybe if I stayed quiet, gave more, bent a little further, we could eventually be enough. But children see what we try to hide. And she saw. She saw the way I disappeared in crowds. The way her father forgot to introduce me. The way his mother smiled at her but looked through me. One night, I found her crying in the bathroom. She said, "Why don't they like you? You're the only reason we have anything." I didn't know what to say. I held her until she fell asleep. Then I got up, wiped my face, and called my lawyer. It wasn't revenge. It was insurance. I drew up a deed. Transferred the lake house, which I'd paid for entirely, into my name again. But I added a clause. That if he ever publicly acknowledged the truth, honored it, I'd gift it back. If not, it would go to our daughter the moment she turned 18. I kept the papers hidden. Told no one. Until she asked me one night, "Do I have to grow up quiet too?" And I told her no. That she could be louder than I ever was, but that sometimes, quiet is the only sound people hear when they've been screaming too long. She was the one who offered to deliver the envelope. Said it should come from her. Said maybe then he'd understand what he was about to lose. I hesitated. She insisted. I folded the deed, placed it in an envelope, and sealed it with my initials. Now, as I sat at that table with the pink ribbon spatula box beside me, I watched her slip it into his jacket. I remembered every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every late night typing someone else's legacy. I remembered the smell of burnt stuffing, the sting of being called the help at my own baby shower, the sick feeling of watching the man I built a life with laugh at jokes made at my expense. And then I remembered the pantry. It was last winter. I'd locked the door just to cry where no one would hear me. But someone had. My daughter. She sat beside me on the pantry floor, held my hand, and said, "You're not invisible, Mom. They're just blind." I didn't speak. Just hugged her and made a quiet decision. Back in the banquet hall, the man with the briefcase was speaking. I saw my fiancé's face shift, recognition, then panic. My mother-in-law frowned, then forced a smile. The guests glanced around, confused. The room was still for the first time all evening. But something was coming. Something they couldn't joke away or bury with wine. And I knew, this time, they would hear me. Even if I never said a word. The man with the briefcase didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room had already stilled, as if everyone could feel the shift, like the moment before a storm breaks. He stepped up beside my fiancé at the mic, nodded once to me, and opened the briefcase with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than all the laughter that had filled the room just moments before. My mother-in-law stiffened. Her wine glass hovered mid-air, forgotten. My fiancé glanced between us, caught in some invisible current, unsure whether to move or stay still. The man pulled out a folder. Cream-colored, thick, held closed with a silver clip. No fanfare. No announcement. He looked at my fiancé and asked, "Would you like to explain, or shall I?" My fiancé hesitated. I could see the war in his eyes, between comfort and conscience, between denial and truth. His fingers twitched. Then, without answering, he stepped back and let the man take the mic. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Quiet. Devastating. The man introduced himself as an estate attorney. A representative. Not mine, but my daughter's. The envelope she had slipped into her father's pocket? It hadn't just held the title deed to the lake house. It also contained a formal letter of intent, drawn up months ago and co-signed by me, declaring the transfer of all shared assets into a trust for her future, triggered upon public defamation or non-recognition of contribution by either parent. Legal terms. Sharp edges. The room didn't gasp. It exhaled. Uncomfortably. My mother-in-law laughed. Once, short and tight. "This is a joke," she said. "A stunt. Surely you're not suggesting." But the man interrupted her with nothing but paper. He opened the folder and pulled out receipts. Property purchase dates. Business loan transfers. Bank statements. All bearing my name. All tracing the life she mocked back to me. She has, for the last 11 years, funded every major expense attached to this family, he said, his voice clear, steady. The down payment on the lake house. The original seed for the firm. The loan that was repaid by a silent partner, also her. A pause. "The dress you're wearing tonight was purchased on her credit line." There were no cheers. No vindication music. Just silence so thick I could hear my own breathing. My fiancé's hands trembled at his sides. His lips parted. He looked at me, not like a man cornered, but like someone seeing a reflection he had forgotten belonged to someone else. There was no anger in me. Just a steady sort of stillness. I had nothing left to give them. Not even outrage. My daughter stood beside me now. Her hand in mine again. And for the first time, I felt taller than the chandelier that had once seemed to spotlight my erasure. My mother-in-law was fuming, cheeks blotched, her words tripping over each other. "This is a family matter," she hissed. "This is a wedding, not a courtroom." But it was too late. The damage wasn't done by scandal. It was done by facts. Cold, undeniable, quiet truth. No one stood to defend her. The guests looked away, suddenly fascinated by their cutlery, their phones, their wine glasses. The aunt who had clapped at the gold digger joke now fidgeted with her bracelet. Even the ex, smug and smirking minutes ago, looked like she wanted to dissolve into the centerpiece. The attorney finished calmly. "The trust has now been activated. The lake house, the vacation property, and 20% of the firm's equity are no longer accessible to either parent without unanimous consent from the beneficiary." There was a beat. Then another voice. My fiancé's. Low. Raspy. "She warned me," he said. "She told me once years ago that I'd lose her without a sound. That one day I'd look up and she'd be gone. I thought she was just hurt. I didn't realize." He looked down, almost whispering. "I didn't realize she meant it." His mother reached for him. He stepped away. He turned to me then. Really turned. His eyes not pleading, not demanding, just hollowed by the weight of what he'd finally seen. "I'm sorry," he said. "I let her mock you. I let them all treat you like you were nothing. I was scared of pushing back. I thought if I just kept the peace." "You kept the silence," I said. "And I filled it." He nodded, broken. "What happens now?" I looked at my daughter, then at the room. My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. "Now we eat cake," I said and stood. But I didn't walk to the dessert table. I walked to the exit. The spatula still sat on the table, untouched. I didn't take it. I didn't need to. Some symbols are too small to carry with you. Some, you leave behind like empty shells. My daughter followed me. The attorney gathered his papers and trailed after. No one moved to stop us. My fiancé stayed standing, alone at the mic. As we reached the door, a slow hand clap echoed behind us. One person. Then another. Not applause. Something more like acknowledgement. Hesitant. Soft. Like people clapping at the end of a long, hard truth. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. My daughter looked up at me. "Did it work?" she asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the next part wasn't mine alone anymore. And I wasn't walking into it as someone's placeholder ever again. The lake house was quieter than I remembered. Maybe it always had been, and I was just now hearing it without the noise of need. The windows faced the water like they were trying to forget the world behind them. I had unpacked everything in silence, one box at a time, no ceremony. There were no family portraits. No thank you letters. Just art pieces I'd collected when I still believed beautiful things could protect you. I left the pink ribbon spatula behind at the venue. Someone else could throw it away. I had no use for it now, and no interest in memorializing that night beyond what lived inside me. The deed was back in my name. The trust was sealed. My daughter had her future, and I had the present. We didn't go back to the city. Not even for the things he begged me to collect. He sent messages. Long ones at first. Then shorter. Then none. He didn't try to argue the facts. He didn't try to refute the trust. He only asked if there was a chance. If I would speak to him. If she could see him. I didn't block him. I didn't answer, either. Some silences are earned, not given. He had filled years with absence dressed as peace. I wasn't going to spend another minute trying to explain the difference. His mother left a voicemail too. Just one. Cold, clipped, pretending none of it had happened. She asked if we'd consider rescheduling the wedding, said there'd been misunderstandings. She even offered to make it right, as if dignity were something that could be wrapped in an apology and served on fine china. She never mentioned the trust. Never asked what part of the house she'd worn white to claim had been legally erased from their reach. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. My daughter was playing piano in the next room, and the music was too soft to ruin with old noise. We planted a garden behind the house. She picked wildflowers from the edge of the lake and pressed them into a journal she called our ledger of beautiful things. I started painting again. Not for money. Just for the rhythm. Just to see how color moved when no one was telling it what to be. Some mornings I would wake before dawn and sit by the dock, coffee in hand, watching the sun smear light across the still water like it was healing the surface from yesterday. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The house had always been built on love. My love. My labor. My belief that a life could be carved from compromise and made to look like harmony. But what I had now wasn't compromise. It was clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted space. I didn't want apologies. I wanted honesty. And most of all, I wanted my daughter to know what it looked like when a woman said, "Enough." I kept one photo on the wall in the hallway. It was of the three of us. Back when she was 5. We'd gone to a fair, and he had lifted her onto his shoulders while I held their hands. We looked happy. And maybe we were, in that exact moment. I didn't keep it to mourn the past. I kept it to remind myself that even illusions can hold joy, for a while. And that love, however flawed, can still carry something real inside it. She asked me once if I missed him. I told her I missed the version of him I'd believed in. But that version never stood up. Never spoke up. Never reached for me when I was shrinking under the weight of silence. She nodded like she understood. And I think she did. She'd seen too much to not. On her 13th birthday, she handed me a wrapped box with a small card taped to the side. I opened it and found a metal spatula inside. It wasn't the same one. This one was new. Sleek. Weighted. Engraved with 7 tiny words along the handle. The only thing I ever needed served. I laughed. Then cried. Then hugged her so hard she squeaked. I didn't send invites for anything anymore. I didn't post. I didn't update old friends or explain where I'd gone. The people who mattered found me anyway. And the ones who didn't? Well, they stayed exactly where they'd always been, just far enough to judge, but never close enough to help. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From him. No begging. Just a single page. He said he'd left the company. That he was back to square one. That he saw me now. Not as the woman he built with, but as the one who built it all. He didn't ask for a response. He ended it with 5 words. The same ones I had once whispered years ago, before the silence began. I hope you're at peace. I folded the letter, placed it in the back of a drawer, and went to check the tomatoes in the garden. They said I didn't belong. I said goodbye.